In 1983, a Soviet military computer detected 5 American nuclear missiles heading straight for Moscow. The protocol was simple. Retaliate. Immediately. No questions asked. One man had 60 seconds to make a decision that would determine whether 8 billion people lived or died. He chose to ignore the alarm. And if he hadn't, you wouldn't be watching this video. You wouldn't be watching anything. Ever. His name was Stanislav Petrov, and almost nobody knows who he is. Let's fix that. Okay, let's set the scene. It's September 26th, 1983. The Cold War is at its absolute peak. And when I say peak, I mean both sides have enough nuclear weapons to destroy the planet several times over, which is a completely sane and normal thing for humans to do. Relations between the US and the Soviet Union are, to put it politely, absolutely terrible. 3 weeks earlier, the Soviet military had shot down a Korean passenger plane, KL-007, killing 269 civilians, including a US congressman. The Americans were furious. Ronald Reagan had recently called the USSR an evil empire, which, diplomatically speaking, is not great. Both sides genuinely believed the other was about to start a war. The tension was so bad that NATO was running a military exercise called Operation Able Archer, simulating a nuclear attack on the Soviet Union. The Soviets weren't entirely sure it was just an exercise. Everyone's finger was hovering over the button, and into this absolutely delightful atmosphere, we introduce our hero. Stanislav Petrov was a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Defense Forces. He was 44 years old. He was good at his job. He did not particularly want to be responsible for ending human civilization, which is a reasonable preference to have. On the night of September 26th, he was the duty officer at Serpukhov 15, the Soviet nuclear early warning bunker outside Moscow. His job was straightforward: monitor the satellite system for incoming American missiles, and if detected, report immediately up the chain of command so the Soviet leadership could respond. Respond meaning launch everything we have. The system was called Oko, which means eye in Russian. Very poetic for something designed to watch for the apocalypse. At exactly 0:15 Moscow time, the eye blinked. The alarm went off. Not a gentle beep. A full, screaming siren. Red lights everywhere. The word launch flashing on the screen in large, helpful letters, just in case you weren't panicking enough already. The system reported 1 American Minuteman missile inbound, heading for the Soviet Union. Petrov had minutes to decide: real attack or false alarm. Protocol said, report it. Let the generals decide. That's what the system was designed for. That's what every training exercise had prepared him to do. And then the system updated. 2 missiles, then 3, then 4, then 5. 5 American nuclear missiles, confirmed by satellite, heading for the Soviet Union. The confidence level on screen read, highest. Every person in that bunker was staring at Petrov. Here's where it gets interesting. And by interesting, I mean absolutely terrifying. Petrov had approximately 60 seconds before he needed to pick up the phone and report to his superiors. After that, the Soviet leadership would have their own narrow window to authorize a retaliatory strike, which they almost certainly would have done. Because that was the entire point of having nuclear weapons. The chain of events, once started, was basically unstoppable. So, 5 missiles. Highest confidence. 60 seconds. What do you do? Petrov did not pick up the phone. He sat there, in a bunker, with sirens screaming, with everyone watching him, with the most powerful military machine in human history waiting for his call. And he thought, something feels wrong. Here's his reasoning. And honestly, for a man with 60 seconds and an active nuclear alarm, this is some impressive thinking. First, if the Americans were actually launching a nuclear-first strike, why only 5 missiles? The US had thousands of warheads. A real attack would be hundreds of missiles simultaneously. You don't start World War III with 5. That's not how annihilation works. Second, the Soviet satellite system was relatively new. It had known technical issues. Petrov was aware of this because he had actually studied the system's design, which, as it turns out, is extremely useful when the system starts telling you the world is ending. Third, and this is the part that gets me, it was a gut feeling. A trained, experienced, technically educated gut feeling. But still, the man looked at the data and thought, I don't believe this. So he picked up the phone and reported it as a false alarm, just like that, while the sirens were still going. While his colleagues thought he'd lost his mind, while, theoretically, 5 nuclear warheads were still supposedly inbound, he reported it as a false alarm and waited to find out if he was right. He was right. The system had malfunctioned. The satellites had picked up sunlight reflecting off clouds and interpreted it as missile launches. 5 Phantom missiles, 0 actual apocalypse, a software bug, in the most consequential early warning system ever built. Detecting sunlight. Petrov had saved the world from a glitch. Now, you might expect that after this, Stanislav Petrov received a medal, a parade, perhaps a modest statue, a national holiday, something. What actually happened is considerably more Soviet. He was neither rewarded nor punished, officially, because rewarding him would mean acknowledging the system had failed, which was embarrassing, and punishing him was difficult, because technically, he had just prevented nuclear war, which even Soviet bureaucracy found hard to spin negatively. He was reassigned, quietly, to a less sensitive position. He did receive a reprimand, not for ignoring the alarm, but for failing to properly fill out his logbook during the incident, because paperwork, apparently, does not stop for potential Armageddon. He retired. He lived modestly. He gave a few interviews. He said, with characteristic understatement, that he was just doing his job, and that he didn't feel like a hero. The incident was classified by the Soviet Union and wasn't publicly known until 1998, 15 years later. Here's what keeps me up at night about this story. Petrov was not supposed to be on duty that night. The officer who was originally scheduled called in sick. Petrov was the replacement. He was also not supposed to be the kind of officer who second-guessed the system. The entire Soviet military doctrine was built around following protocol. The system existed precisely so that individual humans wouldn't have to make judgment calls under pressure. But the system was wrong, and the human was right. And here's the thing nobody talks about. Petrov himself said he wasn't sure. He said it was 50-50. He made the call not because he was certain, but because something didn't add up, and he decided to trust that feeling over a screaming computer. One man, one gut feeling, 8 billion lives. There's also this. The same year, 1983, NATO's Operation Able Archer nearly triggered a Soviet preemptive strike because Soviet intelligence genuinely couldn't tell if it was an exercise or the real thing. We came within a hair's breadth of nuclear war twice in the same year, and most people have never heard of either incident. The Cold War wasn't just a political standoff. It was decades of moments where everything could have ended, and didn't. Often because of one person making one quiet decision in one room that nobody ever heard about. Petrov died in 2017. He received some international recognition in his later years. A Dresden Peace Prize, a meeting at the UN, a documentary. Better late than never, I suppose, for the man who ensured there would be a later. So next time someone asks you to name the most important person of the 20th century, the person whose single decision had the most direct impact on whether humanity survived, you could say Churchill, Roosevelt. You could say various generals and presidents and kings. Or you could say a Soviet lieutenant colonel who was filling in for a sick colleague, sitting alone in a bunker at midnight, who looked at a screaming alarm system telling him the world was ending, and said, "I don't think so," and was right. His name was Stanislav Petrov, and he saved your life. You're welcome.